So I saw today that Cadbury mini eggs now has a new flavor of cookies and cream, which is one of my favorite things ever. So needless to say, I was super excited and got a bag. Hello everyone, it is Samantha and I hope you guys are having a great day today. Today I am here to talk about all the books that I read in February. That is correct. Today is my February reading wrap up. And spoilers, it was not the best reading month for me, which seems to just be the story of my life for the past few years, so I guess it was average then. So in the month of February, I read a whopping 3 books. I did start 2 others, but I came nowhere even close to finishing them, so what are you gonna do? All 3 of the books that I read were in fact fantasy for a total of 1,403 pages, which averages to about 50 pages a day and about 460 pages a book. So, you know, not the strongest reading month I've ever had. Gonna try and rectify that in March, hopefully. We're also on the 3rd day of the month and I've read maybe 50 pages, so. Of the books that I read, 33%, aka 1, were hardback and the rest were all trade paperback. In terms of book length, I had one between 300 and 400 pages, one between 400 and 500, and the last was between 500 and 600 pages. In terms of years published, one book was published in 2016 and the other 2 were actually published this year, so recent releases. And finally, in terms of star rating, 2 of the books that I read were 4 stars and 1 was 3.5 stars, so it was definitely a very average reading month for me. So that wraps up the statistics portion of this video, and so now without further ado, I will actually tell you what books I read and all of my thoughts. The first book that I finished the month of February was Marksman by Rati Marotta. This came out in January, so it is a new release, and it features the main protagonist of Kyra, who is the youngest markswoman of the Order of Kali. Kyra is not only the youngest markswoman, but she also comes from a bit of a troubled past. Her entire family and clan were murdered at the hands of another clan, and so she ends up joining the Order of Kali, not only to find her place in the world, but also to learn the tools in which she can exact her own vengeance against the clan that murdered her clan. But soon after the start of this book, events start unfolding in which Kyra is swept along in their wake, and soon the entire Order of Kali is disrupted when the leader of their order is murdered, and the murderer is one of the fellow members of the clan of Kali. So Kyra kind of sets out to prove who the murderer is and to exact vengeance on behalf of the leader of their order that was killed. And in the process, she stumbles upon the Order of Kerr, which is an order much like the Order of Kali, except for it is made up entirely of men. So she soon discovers her own place in this clan while also trying to prepare herself to face the woman that murdered the leader of the Order of Kali. So while I found this book entertaining, it definitely did not live up to the expectations that I had for it. I was really hoping this would be a slightly more riveting book than it was, but I think the biggest issue with this book was probably pacing. It kind of started to bog down in the middle and feel a little bit repetitive and tedious. The other aspect of this book I didn't much care for was the character of Shurek. I found Shurek to be an extremely frustrating character. He was infatuated with Kyra, and he was basically not allowing her to make her own decisions. He started to basically make her decisions for her. He felt that he knew what was best for her and was going to do whatever it took to protect her, basically. But he wasn't allowing her to make her own decisions, and I just felt him to be very smothering. And I know that was the kind of the point of his character, but I still found him really, really frustrated. He was probably one of my least favorite characters, even more so than the actual villain of this book. I just found him really, really annoying. The other aspect of this book that I would have liked to have seen more of was the world building. This book seems to take place in a post-apocalyptic world because it is a melding of kind of medieval type warfare and living with modern technology that's left over from the past. So there's definitely a story there because they talk about these beings that kind of helped humanity out and then took off and left them with all this technology, and that happened like, you know, a couple thousand years ago or hundreds of years ago. But we're only giving a taste of it, and I have a feeling we're going to see more of this in the future books, but it definitely did not get a whole lot of it in this one. So I would have liked to have seen more world building and more about the different types of people that live here, because it is based upon Indian culture, and I would have liked to have just had more context for the world that these people are living in, and I didn't quite get that. I also really like books that have quite a bit of world building. It is a YA novel, and they tend to be a little bit more character focused than world focused, but there is a good balance there that I think you can achieve, and I feel like it kind of failed a little bit in that area. But I still thought it was definitely a decent book. It is a series that I'm very interested and excited to continue on with. Sometimes the first book is so much of a setup book that it tends to be on many occasions the weakest book in a series, so I'm definitely excited to see what more this author produces and to continue to follow the characters in this world. So overall I ended up rating this book 3.5 3.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the characters 3.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the world building 3 stars. I gave the writing 3.5 out of 5 stars. I gave the pacing 2 stars, and I gave the overall story itself 4 stars. It was a fairly original story and one that I definitely enjoyed. So yeah, for an overall rating of 3.5 stars. So not a stupendous book, but also not the worst I've ever read. So there you go. And in terms of my book out statistics, I ended up reading this book in 6 hours and 2 minutes. My best reading time was 60 pages an hour. And the most pages I read in a day was 134. Most minutes read in a day was 124. So I think I finished this book in like 3 days. So it was definitely a fast read for me, which is good because the other books I read were all a little bit slower paced in terms of my own reading. The next book that I finished in February was The Dreadworm by Miles Cameron. This is a continuation of the Trader's Son cycle. I don't want to give too much away. I've already have a full review I did a couple years ago on the first book in the series, which will give you some context for the story, but a lot has started to happen by the time you get to book 3, so if I say anything about the plot, it'll be heavily spoilery, so I don't want to do that. But suffice it to say, I really enjoyed this book. I didn't enjoy it as much as the first 2, so it was a solid 4-star read for me instead of a 5-star read. But I still found myself enjoying it. It was definitely the most fast-paced of the ones that I've read so far. It added some new characters and some very interesting, unexpected events occurred in this book. There was definitely a lot of twists and turns, which I quite enjoyed. This book series is also an alternate historical retelling of our own world, so it features old names for places that do exist in our own world, such as referring to the UK as Alba and the Kingdom of Gaul and things of that nature. And in this book, they start to introduce characters from what in this world would be Africa. However, the way that Miles Cameron described these characters, I didn't care for. It was very old-fashioned, referring to them as Moors, and just the way that he described their skin color and stuff left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. So that was one aspect of this book that I didn't care for and that knocked the star down for me. So overall, I would say this is the weakest book that I have read in this series so far, but I am excited to see, you know, how the rest of the story progresses and if it continues to get better again, and if he kind of rectifies some of the things that he did in this novel, because I wasn't the biggest fan of some of the ways that he was treating certain characters and certain events. So it'll be interesting to see. So overall, I ended up rating this book about 3.5, 4 stars. I would give the characters 4 stars. I would give the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars. I would give the world building 4 stars. And I would give the overall story itself 3.5 out of 5 stars for an overall rating of about 3.5, 4 stars. In terms of my book out statistics, I ended up reading this book in about 16 hours and 15 minutes. These books are definitely very dense and slow paced, and they can be a little bit hard to get into, so I definitely read these books a lot slower. Reading speed was about 35 pages an hour. The most pages I read in a day was 210, and the most minutes I read in a day was 354. And the final book that I finished in February was Tempest and Slaughter by Tamara Pierce. I will be having a full review of this book up on my channel soon. I've already filmed it, just need to edit it. But suffice it to say, I really enjoyed it. It was great getting back into Tamara Pierce's world and her writing. I didn't realize quite how much I missed it until I got into this book, and I was like, yes, I missed this. This is a book that features the origin story of Numere, who is one of the main characters in her future quartets, and it was great getting to see this character as a child because he was one of my favorite characters from the Wild Magic Quartet. And as a child, however, before he assumed the name of Numere, he was known as Aram Draper, and he was attending the School of Magic in the Carthag Empire. He soon becomes friends with Varese, as well as one of the leftover princes at this time of the Emperor Ozorn, and these are characters that you see in future books as well, so it's kind of cool to see them all as children. So basically follows Aram from the ages of about 10 to about 16 years old as he's progressing in his studies as a mage. He's extremely talented and extremely powerful, as are his 2 friends, so they continue to rise to the ranks of the school very, very quickly and have caught the attention of their teachers and are basically being taught instead of in a classroom. They are instead being taught singularly by each of the magic teachers. Overall, I really enjoyed this book. It was a kind of a weird mixture of middle grade and YA. Towards the end of the book, it started to feel a little bit more YA-ish as the characters got older, but the first half was definitely very middle grade. The pacing was very quick, and you basically followed the 3 of them as they're basically progressing in their day-to-day lives and their studies. It felt very reminiscent of Harry Potter at times, but it was still very much solidly Tamara Pierce's writing, so she definitely continues to kind of set herself apart from other YA and middle grade authors, in my opinion. One of the things I hate about this book was the character of Ozorn. He was extremely racist and extremely bigoted, and it just frustrated me to no end. And you could see Aram really trying to war against that. And towards the end of the book, he was definitely starting to stand up to him more, but it was so hard to read the passages where Ozorn was just basically being a racist little bigoted jerk, and I could not stand it. It was so frustrating. I hated his character. This empire engages in the act of slavery, which is something that Aram and many others in this this world do not agree with at all, including the use of slaves as gladiators. And it was just really hard to read at times. It was just, you could just see how much Aram hated it, and you could just see all these characters being so complacent in it and not thinking there was anything wrong with it. So yeah, it was a little bit hard to read those passages at times. Overall, I ended up rating this book 4 out of 5 stars. While I enjoyed it, it definitely was not my favorite Tamara Pierce book, but I am very excited to see how this story will continue and to kind of see the gods continue to influence Aram's future, and it's just a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Tamara Pierce's books a lot. So I ended up giving the plot 4 out of 5 stars, the characters 4 out of 5 stars, the writing 4.5 out of 5 stars, and the world building 4 out of 5 stars, and the pacing 4 out of 5 stars. It definitely felt a little bit bogged down at times. For an overall rating of 4 stars, definitely a solid 4-star read. In terms of my book out statistics, I read this book in 8.5 hours. My reading speed is about 56 pages a day. My best reading day was 240 pages, and most minutes read in a day was also 240 minutes, so that was interesting. You'll have to forgive the sound of blowers and lawnmowers and edgers, because apparently everybody in my neighborhood decided to do their yards right now. So in addition to reading those 3 books, I did start 2 others, but I did not finish them. The 2 that I started were The Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. I got about halfway through, but sadly was not able to finish it. I am definitely enjoying this book. It's so far it's sitting at about a 4-star read for me. It's not the most amazing book I've ever read, but I'm definitely enjoying it. I'm loving all of the humor, and it definitely reminds me quite a bit of Sebastian de Castell's books. But it's basically following 5 mercenaries who used to tour this country, this world that they belong to, in their young age, but now that they're all about in their 50s, they have to get back together again to save Gabriel, the leader of their mercenary gangs, daughter from a city besieged by all of these wild monsters. It currently feels like a melding of Sebastian de Castell's and Miles Cameron's books, which I'm really enjoying. And I love fantasy books that have a lot of humor in them, and this one definitely does. And the next book that I started but did not finish was The Plague of Swords by Miles Cameron, the 4th book in the Trader's Son cycle. I got a whopping 130 pages into it before I did not finish it. So that was a thing that happened. I did not finish it, I don't think I actually have picked this one up in a week because I've been trying to finish Kings of the Wild. I'm definitely enjoying this one so far. I'm enjoying it more than Dreadworm at the time that I am filming this, but yeah, it's also not very big. It's like 430 pages, which is the shortest of his books. So I'm hoping to finish this one in the next week and a half, and hopefully that will happen because I need to finish a book. It's been like 2 weeks since I finished a book. It's very sad. Alright guys, that's it for my February wrap-up. Those are all of the books that I read and started and all of my thoughts on them. If you have read any of these and you have thoughts on them, please leave them down below, or anything else you want to throw down in the comments, please feel free to do so. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys all have a wonderful day. Until next time, happy reading. Bye!